I believed that the hardest part would be grieving after my dad passed away. You know, figuring out how to live without the one person who has always supported you. It turns out that my husband, who was meant to be by my side, was the one who caused the true heartache. My name is Emma. My age is 36, and I considered my life to be good until a few months ago. Tom, my spouse of 6 years, a steady job, and a house I had created for myself. Charming, encouraging. I used to think he was the type of man who everyone at parties referred to as a real catch. We first met at a convention in Chicago 8 years ago. I was working in the event marketing trenches. He was a keynote speaker. He was self-assured, humorous, and charming in that refined, a bit too smooth manner. On stage, he related a narrative of how he failed at his first business but recovered. People chuckled. So did I. He had a magnetic personality. After that, we had cocktails. It was an instant connection. I informed my dad about him at breakfast the next week. Just remember, Emma, some people shine on stage and dim in real life, he added, stirring his coffee, and I laughed it off. My father was always guarded. He has been my pillar of support in life, career, and everything else since my mother passed away when I was 20. I got married to Tom 2 years later. It was a modest ceremony, with teary eyes and an expression that screamed, I hope I'm wrong about this guy. My dad escorted me down the aisle. Tom's mother, Diane, sat in the first row wearing a fancy dress and looked as like she would rather be anywhere else. At the rehearsal supper, I heard her mutter to Tom, she's nice. Not exactly CEO material, though. It hurt. However, I made an effort. On Mother's Day, I sent her flowers, asked her to suppers. I purchased her expensive scarves because I couldn't afford them at the time. She didn't get warm. Tom always dismissed it. He would add, she's just old school, as though it clarified anything. It was 6 years later. A smoldering flame turned into a wildfire as my dad's health started to deteriorate. Cancer. Hostile. He passed away in his sleep 4 months later. Thank God, in peace. I had no time to get ready. I was organizing his appointments 1 minute, and then I was organizing his funeral. Tom was there, physically, not on an emotional level. I was the one grieving, but he assisted with the logistics. Diane arrived late for the funeral, dipped out before the eulogy, and concealed herself behind dark glasses. She didn't even give me a hug. I ought to have timed that. My dad's lawyer called me the following day. We must inspect the estate, he murmured softly. I didn't give it much thought. I never asked for specifics, but I knew Dad had money because he started a profitable firm from nothing. I assumed there would be 1 or 2 houses. A trust, perhaps, a retiring item. Enough to live a simpler life in peace. I was surprised to learn that he had left me everything. The business, the property's accounts, following taxes, a little more than $35 million. I was totally numb as I sat in the meeting room. I had shaking hands. There was no sense of a gift. It seemed as if he was confirming that he was indeed gone. I spread the papers out on the coffee table that evening. Funeral black is still on. I'm still crying. At that point, Tom entered. He whistled softly as he studied the documents. So it's accurate? Sitting next to me, he inquired, Is it all yours? I gave a nod, still in disbelief, indeed. This was unexpected. He grinned. Not in a proud husband manner, though, like a calculating banker. Well, we ought to start considering our options. Of course, we will invest. Purchase that Aspen property you like, perhaps. We should also determine how much to give my mother. I blinked. Your mom? He said. Yeah, as if that were the most sensible thing in the world. I was reared by her. She is a member of the family. We ought to give her half. Half. I honestly believed he was kidding. I chuckled. Aloud. Then I saw his face, which was composed and grave, as if this had always been the intention. Tom, I continued cautiously, as if I were speaking to a knife-wielding person. This was my dad's estate. Why would we give your mother any of it? He gave me a soft smile, as if I were being gullible. Emma, because she's family. For me, she gave up everything. She is deserving of this. And that was the mask's first crack. It persisted, weighing down the atmosphere like a bad odor. I gave him a serious glance before realizing that I had no idea who the hell was seated across from me. My father left me this, I replied softly. Not us. Not your mother. Tom, it's not a lottery ticket. It is his legacy. He gave a quick breath. Don't be self-centered, Emma. She is my mom. She has endured a great deal. The word was there, self-centered, similar to a slap. The man who promised to love me forever, and who held me while I cried after my first panic attack, was now accusing me of being selfish for refusing to give millions of dollars to a lady who could hardly look me in the eye. I got to my feet. I need to breathe. I heard him murmur, unbelievable, behind me as I left. I didn't get any sleep that night. I tried to understand how quickly things had changed as I gazed at the ceiling and listened to my own heartbeat. Or perhaps the speed with which the mask had fallen. As my father used to say, people are not changed by grief. It reveals their true selves to you. God, he was correct. Tom made coffee the following morning as if nothing had occurred, gave me a cheek kiss, discussed the weather. I remained silent. The term selfish was still in my mind. Then the phone rang. Diane was the one. She had a sweet, syrupy voice. My dear Emma, the good news reached me. Your dad was quite intelligent. I'm really pleased with you. I waited, because I was aware that there would be a but. However, I was considering. Perhaps we can get together soon, talk about numbers, investments, property. Naturally, something modest and elegant for me. Perhaps a small location in Sonoma. The phone was pressed closer to my ear. I had trembling hands. My father passed away less than a week ago, Diane. She gave a tongue click. Additionally, he would want you to look after your family. That is the behavior of decent girls. Good wives, too. That was it. That was the time, I said in a hard, flat voice. Diane, you are not a member of my family. Additionally, you are not receiving a dime. A long pause ensued. Then, sharply and coldly, she yelled, You always believed you were too good for us. See how long you can survive on your own. Click. I put the phone down after staring at it for a whole minute. My hands trembled, but not because of terror. Tom came up to me that evening. He had learned about the call somehow. You had no authority to address my mother in such a manner. She also had no right to request money. Emma, she is my sole relative. And just because you got a windfall doesn't mean you can treat her like trash. I gave him a direct look. Tom, it's hardly a windfall. It's a grave. And you and your mother are circling like vultures rather than joining me in mourning. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His quiet was a powerful statement. That's when I realized. The union remained intact. It was over already. Simply put, I hadn't signed the documents yet. Something changed in me after that phone conversation with Diane. Something profound. Something chilly. Not yet, it wasn't anger. It felt more like waking up. I understood that grieving wasn't the true threat. It was allowing the wrong people to become overly at ease with your weakness. And those individuals were already settling in, literally. Diane began unexpectedly visiting the residence. One time, she arrived with an interior designer and asked if she could redo the downstairs space because she would be spending more time there. Another time, she brought a folder full of real estate listings, upscale homes she thought we could co-invest in. Tom didn't just let it happen. He supported it. He remarked, She's just excited. Stop being so dramatic. Correct. Dramatic. My marriage was disintegrating in real time, and it seems that tone was the problem. I began securing my home office after Diane accidentally entered it for the third time. Passwords were changed, transferred court records to a personal account. I need to know my rights, I stated over the phone to my father's attorney. He didn't flinch. After inheriting a fortune, you're not the first person to enter this place. However, you're among the few who were smart enough to phone ahead of time. Then he said something that made my skin crawl while leaning in. Set up cameras, particularly if you share a home with someone who believes they should have half of everything. I had cameras installed all over the house that same day. Be discreet. Keep quiet. Observing. Diane sneaked back into my office 2 days later. My phone buzzed while I was at work, saying that motion had been detected. From my desk, I watched the video. She entered the room as if she owned it. Unlocked drawers, looked through papers, and even stopped at the locked cabinet where I kept the will. A notepad was not what she was searching for. Leverage was what she sought. That evening, I went over to Tom. Today, your mother was in my office. He didn't flinch. All right? She was looking for the documents related to the inheritance. He let out a sigh and massaged his temples as if I were the source of his fatigue. People are interested, Emma. That's a lot of cash. She wasn't entitled. She took nothing with her. I yelled, she doesn't have to take it. She is attempting to coerce us into handing it to her. Tom got to his feet as if he were going to deliver a TED talk. No one is being manipulated by her. She's attempting to assist. And to be honest, you should be appreciative that someone has a clear head. I gazed at him. Thankful? He gave a nod. You seem to be hoarding things. A hoarder. It was a slap of a word. It informed me all I needed to know about how he suddenly saw me. Not because it was offensive. Not in a romantic relationship. Not as a daughter in mourning. Like a safe. Like a wallet. He viewed my father's passing as an opportunity rather than a sorrow. My chance, that he believed he was entitled to. Something hardened within of me. I said softly, Tom, this isn't about family. This has to do with greed. Additionally, you no longer view me as your wife after my father passed away. Instead, you now view me as a living, breathing ATM. He rushed out. I didn't pay attention. Breathing like someone who has just escaped a fire. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't weep for my father. Not that evening. I shed tears for myself. Because the first secretly knew that I was no longer married. Simply put, I hadn't signed the documents yet. I scheduled 3 appointments for the following morning. A financial counselor. A second lawyer. One who focused on high net worth divorces and asset protection. And a security firm to update the system once more. I then began transferring funds, slowly, with caution. Every step is lawful, and every transfer is recorded. I wasn't acting suspiciously. I was being clever. I engaged a private investigator as well, to follow Diane instead of Tom. I wasn't shocked by what he discovered. Debt from credit cards. 2 businesses failed. A recent question concerning starting a high-end skincare company with no funding. No business strategy. No support. Feelings only. So, yes, the claws were logical. In the meantime, Tom started acting strangely. He suddenly became affectionate after being aloof and frigid. Flowers, supper, wine. He sat across from me as we were on our first date one evening while he prepared pasta, the one dish he remembered I enjoyed. He remarked, I've been thinking, perhaps we started out poorly. It's been difficult. Losing your father, preparing for the future. Simply put, the money discussion has gotten in the way. Slowly, I nodded. What are you saying then? With bright eyes, he said, let's go on a trip, somewhere that's peaceful. Me and you, no attorneys. Only us. He grinned. That's when I noticed it. The math behind the grin, not the smile itself. It wasn't love. This was a tactic. He reasoned that I would become careless if he made me soft again. That I would become careless. Allow him to return to the financial aspect of things, perhaps. Sweet as sugar, I smiled back. At the moment, I have too much going on at work. Is there a rain check? He gave a nod. However, I noticed the glimmer of annoyance in his eyes. Something odd caught my attention the following morning. I had my laptop open a little. Every time I shut it, always, I looked over the activity log. 2 unsuccessful tries to log in. Approximately 2:40 a.m. It must have been a glitch, Tom insisted. I refrained from arguing. I simply reset all of the passwords. And I heeded the last piece of advice from my lawyer. Record. Everything. So I did. I captured every strange exchange, all of the passive-aggressive remarks. I even backed up the home security camera footage onto a flash drive in response to every attempt to guilt me into doing the right thing, because I always brought receipts with me when I was ready to depart. Tom quit playing the part 3 days after the laptop incident. The flowers? Lost. The phony warmth? Lost. He just hovered now. Observed. Waited. As though he was aware that something was eluding him and was unsure of how to stop it. Diane, though? She went into overdrive. One morning, she was in my kitchen when I got home. Barefoot, putting on my robe. sipping my coffee, as if she actually resided there. You must go, I stated bluntly. She had a snake-like smile. We must speak. I gazed at her. No, we don't. Unconcerned, she crossed her legs. You're under a lot of stress, Emma. I only want to confirm that you're not doing anything. Impetuous. I hope you don't make a financial error, I chuckled, out loud. You mean an error such as failing to give millions to a person who hasn't had a job since Obama took office? She squinted. Be careful, Emma. Making enemies in your own home is not a smart idea. Calm and cool, I took a step forward. You don't live here. The money isn't either. Now, leave before I contact the police. You think you're smart, she said before leaving. However, ladies like you ultimately break. After she left, I locked the door. I then inhaled deeply. I also gave my lawyer a call. It's time, I declared. Since I wasn't breaking, I was letting loose. I sat across from my lawyer in a downtown cafe, the morning after Diane sipped coffee in my kitchen, as if she had paid the mortgage. Adrenaline compensated for my lack of sleep. Sliding a folder over the table, I declared, I'm ready. It contained voicemails, text messages, screenshots of Tom's unsuccessful efforts to access my laptop, and camera footage of Diane searching through drawers. Proof. Make use of leverage. A paper trail tainted with malice and entitlement. My lawyer looked through everything as if he had seen it all before and nodded. Most likely he had. When they aren't pursuing their money, wealthy individuals become messy, he said. We'll file quietly. No fireworks. Not a press. However, you cannot unring the bell after the documents have been served. I gave a faint smile. Since my dad's funeral, that bell has been ringing. I had the locks changed that afternoon. Once more. Through my lawyer, I wrote Diane a cease and desist, blocked her on all platforms. I unshared all of the digital accounts I had foolishly linked to Tom, including the shared calendar, Netflix, and banking. I then arranged for Tom and I to meet in a neutral cafe. Public. Managed. There must be witnesses somewhere. Wearing his completely composed and rational smile, he arrived 5 minutes late. The one he used at parties to pitch people on a startup idea that had not yet been developed. He slid into the seat opposite from me and said, Emma, as if we were having a laid-back breakfast. Without a word, I gave him a manila envelope. He pulled it open. After roughly 2 paragraphs, his smile faded. You're going to divorce me? With piercing eyes, as if I had just admitted to murder, he asked. No, I replied. I'm getting a divorce from the man who labeled me selfish when I was grieving for my dad. You? I have no idea who you are anymore. His laughter was tight, phony, and cruel. Money is at stake here. I gave a headshake. Respect is at issue here. Or, more precisely, its absence. His expression clouded. You believe that you can simply take everything with you? Calm as ever, I leaned in. I have already. Then he tried the legal angle after scoffing. You are aware that I have a right to half. Our marriage has lasted for 6 years. There was a flash drive inside the second packet. I slid across the table. You have a right to the very little that we created together. The bequest? Protected by law. It was left to me by my father. Distinct property. And the judge has every reason to deny you any further money. Because of this, I tapped the flash drive. He regarded it as though it were radioactive. I'm going to give you a clean split. Leave with what is lawfully yours, and I won't file a lawsuit for emotional distress or seek a restraining order. Tom tightened his jaw and leaned back. You believe you've triumphed? I looked him in the eye without flinching. No, I believe I'm no longer losing. He got up, grabbed the envelope, and walked out silently. I slept that night for the first time in weeks. Not very well, but in a calm manner. Until my lawyer called 3 days later. He stated, Tom's filed a response. He is asking for spousal support. I nearly dropped the phone. He what? He is asserting emotional contributions to your shared lifestyle aspirations and general well-being. In simple English, he demands payment for supporting you emotionally at your time of grief. I sat there in disbelief, trying not to laugh. The same man who allowed his mother to access my files and labeled me a selfish bitch? My attorney let out a breath. We'll take care of it. Everything we require is here. And we did. We provided voice snippets, text threads, and video evidence. Evidence of emotional neglect, harassment, and manipulation. Diane's spying footage. My therapist's notes. Tom was looking for inheritance loopholes before my dad's body was cold, according to internet data. The days that followed were nevertheless stressful. Like the air before a storm, everything was quiet but charged. Calls from blocked numbers began. Strange emails appeared. You'll regret this. According to one voicemail left from what was clearly a burner phone. Family members don't treat one another like this. Family, correct. Rebuilding my peace was the one thing that gave me strength in the interim. I returned to the fitness center. I made a therapy appointment. Twice a day, I took my dog for walks. I created lists of minor tasks that I could manage, like laundry, installing new locks, and opening a new bank account. Every routine chore seemed like a reclamation. I found out that Tom had returned to living with Diane through common connections. Evidently, despite having little money, no credit, and Diane's irrational confidence, they were consulting with a financial expert about flipping houses. It wasn't going well. To give you a hint, the week after my dad passed away, Tom resigned from his job, presumably thinking I would support him in his new life. However, because of some really clean paperwork, he was suddenly without a job, an apartment, and access to anything that was registered in my father's name, including the business car he had previously driven. It was repossessed for me, lawfully. After that, things quickly fell apart. The court completely dismissed his spousal support petition 2 weeks later. In addition to the fact that he is receiving nothing, my attorney stated that the judge views his behavior as deceptive and even predatory. We can attempt to obtain a restraining order if he escalates. I paused after nodding. That should remain in our back pocket. Tom's silence was overwhelming. Until my phone rang one evening. Private number. I answered against my better judgment. Emma, he said. His voice broke. Please, simply, listen to me. I said nothing at all. I am aware of my error. I became avaricious. I was thinking about Mom. However, I do miss you. We are missed. I let the silence to linger. Allow him to sense it. Then he lost it. This cannot be done to me. Years of my life were given to you. I receive nothing now, and there it was. The reality. Stupid and raw. I was never adored by Tom. He cherished the steadiness, position, and access I provided him. I became disposable the instant I ceased to be useful. I inhaled. I said, You gave me nothing, and I have even less to repay you. I hung up after that, blocked the number, and entered the following phase of my life as though I had at last stopped feeling guilty about establishing limits. The divorce was formally finalized 1 week following Tom's last call, signed, stamped. Filed. He left with a settlement so meager that it most likely hurt his pride more than his pocketbook. I took everything else with me, including my dignity, my father's firm, my inheritance, and most significantly, my tranquility. However, I was discovering that peace was brittle, particularly when the individuals you recently disconnected are accustomed to parasitically consuming your stability. There was silence at first, a quiet, lovely silence. No more spiritual haze of Diane's scent lingering in the corridor. No more Tom pacing the living room while surreptitiously looking through Zillow properties he thought I would fund, while feigning to study contracts. Just be quiet. My breathing returned. I awoke, made some coffee, and sat in the early sun like a storm survivor, finally enjoying the warmth of the sun on their skin. When I realized that I had gone 3 full days without hearing a single passive-aggressive remark masquerading as concern, I even burst out laughing. However, when your absence brings someone else's world to an end, peace is short-lived, and it collapsed. The moment I filed for divorce, Tom's plan, the fiction he created in his mind that I would support his mother's lifestyle while he managed my dad's business, was shattered. Diane? She was falling apart. She apparently had to close the skincare line she was planning after defaulting on a large credit card by making a big announcement on Facebook without actually filing an LLC. They relocated across town to a rental condo. Though not quite at the inheriting a legacy tier, it's still not a bad place. Then the messages began. Once more, burner figures, fresh emails, dangerous threats that hovered just below the law. You think this is the end of it? You'll come to regret your actions. This can be fixed before it's too late. And my own favorite, as stated by Diane, families do not behave in this manner. I hope your work has satisfied you. As though, rather than simply reclaiming what was never theirs in the first place, I had set the home on fire while they were inside. The correspondence was handled by my attorney. I managed the quiet. However, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for some reason. There wasn't much waiting for me. I heard a faint click outside the kitchen one Thursday night, shortly after midnight. A pause. Then the distinctive creaking sound of the rear gate. I went cold, listened. Once more, there was movement, gentle footsteps. Then there was a shadow close to the patio door. I refrained from screaming, did not run. With composure, I grabbed my phone, opened the security app, and viewed the live broadcast. Tom was the one. On the patio, his hands were in his pockets, just looking into the house as if he were still a resident. I made a police call. Within minutes, they were there, but Tom was gone. Like a coward, they slipped away. Like a person who tests limits before going over them. I submitted a report, equipped the gate with a camera, and I finally did what I had been putting off. Order of restraint. Filed. Accepted. Served. A letter from Tom's new lawyer, a cheapskate who specializes in defending discredited realtors and irate ex-spouses, was forwarded to my lawyer 2 days later. I was accused of harassment in the letter. The letter called for a mediation session to negotiate fairness, claiming that I had caused emotional distress and financial instability by denying them access to family resources. I immediately sent it to my shredder. Fairness? Rather of having my husband and his mother hover over the will, like buzzards with Louis Vuitton bags, Fair would have been able to grieve my dad in solitude. I couldn't deny that it shook me, though. The idea that Tom, who used to kiss my forehead every morning and tell me, "You're my calm," suddenly viewed me as the antagonist in his disintegrating fantasy, it hurt. For approximately 1 hour. Then I realized that just because someone used to be close to you doesn't mean you owe them access. My 5-minute phone checks have ceased. I resumed attending meetings at work. I got back in touch with old acquaintances that I had discreetly cut off over the marriage maintenance years. It's funny because until you start stretching again, you notice how much you've shrunk. I even confided in my therapist about it. The loneliness, the rage, and the guilt that arise when you wake up at 3 in the morning, even though everyone else believes you're winning. Consider whether any of it was genuine. Something she said lingered in my memory. To you, it was real. That is sufficient. I clung to that. Weeks went by. The legal bullshit subsided. Every platform, account, and shared lease had my name cleared. On paper, in the system, and ultimately in my thoughts, Tom was no longer a part of my existence. I celebrated by taking a modest but incredibly fulfilling action. I reclaimed my dad's place. He had purchased it downtown years prior to the company's true explosion. For a long, it sat unused. I had never moved in, but I had continued to pay taxes on it. Too many memories. Right now, it seemed like a second opportunity, a fresh start. 4 barriers that have not been betrayed. I made renovations, fresh paint, lighter hues, softer furnishings, opened the shelves, dot plants. It was not a shout of affluence. Peace was muttered. And I felt something settle in my chest one evening, as I stood barefoot in the kitchen brewing tea, alone with no plans, no voices, and no one scheming behind my back. Silence. Not only getting by, not only recovery. At home. However, the final card was dealt just when I believed it was finally really over. The mail brought an envelope. No address for return. It has a typewritten note and one picture. I was in the picture, captured from afar. In a cafe, the message said. I'm still observing, no signature, no interaction, nothing more than a silent threat. With a steady heartbeat, I gazed at it for a long time, not afraid, simply exhausted. I reported it to the police. Once more. Sent all of this to my attorney. Once more. After that, I inhaled deeply, tore up the letter, and lighted a candle across the apartment. They truly didn't know the woman I'd become. If they believed they could frighten me back into silence, remorse, or their story, I didn't feel afraid. I had only barely begun. I should have been shaken by the letter. The nameless snapshot, the ambiguous threat, the whole I'm still watching, feeling it's the sort of stuff you see in a lousy thriller. But really, I simply felt worn out. When you eventually stop allowing others to eat at your table, you'll be exhausted by the lengths they will go to. I didn't feel scared. I was finished. I sent everything to the police and subsequently to my lawyer. One more report, one more sigh. Do you know who sent this? Inquires another cop. I can think of two people who still think my father's money belongs to them, I added, glancing at him. Then there was stillness. Not another letter, no more phone calls, not even phony Instagram profiles that follow me in a passive-aggressive manner. At last, I realized that they were finished, or they had recognized that I was no longer playing. The house always prevails, and suddenly, I was the house. The divorce was behind them. There had been no progress on the litigation. The court dismissed Tom's petition for spousal support. Diane's absurd allegation of emotional distress dismissed without another look. It turns out that the legal argument I wanted millions, but she said no, is not well received by judges. The old residence was sold by me. Too many memories that smelled like treachery. Too many echoes. I only needed to let it go. I didn't need to burn it down. I moved into my dad's apartment, which he saved just in case and purchased years ago before his business took off. Have a place that's yours, he would always say. Only yours, not disclosed. Not borrowed. Yours. I therefore started over there. I painted over it. Acquired new furnishings. No ghosts, warm floors, gentle lighting, and open windows. And I came to the following realization one evening while holding a mug of tea in my barefooted kitchen. I had lost my anger. Not by any means. No, not at Tom. No, not at Diane. Not even at my own failure to recognize it sooner. Because they lost, I wasn't upset. What was important was not taken. They attempted to turn my sorrow into a business deal, attempted to coerce me into feeling guilty, tried to persuade me that I was selfish for defending what my father had constructed. I didn't fall for it, though. They detest that. Because they're liked by people, they anticipate your failure. They rely on your generosity turning into obedience. My quiet was interpreted by them as weakness. The fact that stillness may also be the sound of something solidifying, however, is something they failed to comprehend and would never comprehend. A line, a choice, a reckoning. I was that person. Solidifying. Using a portion of my inheritance, I established a scholarship fund in my father's honor for first-generation college students who want to study medicine. Dad was always an advocate of access, in offering folks a genuine chance. Additionally, I utilized another portion to finance mentorship initiatives for young women navigating demanding professions. Women who had previously mistaken manipulation for love, just like me. Respectful obligation. Because of the following, the money wasn't the point. It wasn't. It has to do with control. And I began truly healing when I stopped allowing other people to dictate the parameters of my peace. When I at last put my needs ahead of appearances, approbation, and keeping the peace. I no longer look over my shoulder as I make my way to my car. I don't wait to see what happens next. I don't mentally practice my responses before I decline. I simply live. A few months after everything had calmed down, I discovered an old envelope stuffed inside one of Dad's books one afternoon. On the front was his penmanship. Though it faded, the ink was still distinct. There was a letter inside. Years before his death, he had written it. No date. A brief note. Emma, I'm probably not here anymore if you're reading this. It's all right. Even when you didn't feel it, you are always powerful. Just keep in mind that individuals are not changed by money. It makes them visible. When it's love, share. When under strain, protect. And choose peace. If someone ever forces you to choose between satisfying them and maintaining peace, all of them. Time. I cherish you. Always. Father the first sobbed, not because I was depressed, but without acknowledgement. He was aware. Even so, he always knew, somehow. The letter was framed by me. It was hung near the front door, a silent compass. I still get asked about the divorce occasionally. Regarding what transpired, I don't discuss the court documents, or the emails, or the dangers. This is what I tell them without respect. Love is merely ownership, I discovered. Furthermore, a family without bounds is anarchy. I didn't make it through that marriage. I outgrew it. And perhaps the best retaliation I've ever committed was recovering without their presence. So here I am, standing, no longer quiet, yet still gentle. Emma, still, just more liberated. And lastly, entirely mine.